Welcome to Roger That, a podcast presented by HVAF of Indiana. I'm Lauren Carpenter, but before we get started with today's episode, I do have a bit of an announcement to make. Since 2017, I have had the honor to be HVAF's storyteller, graphic designer, videographer, social media poster, media relations coordinator, and more recently, podcaster. Over the past 7 years, it's been such a blessing and privilege to not only hear our Hoosier Heroes stories, but to be able to share them with you all. But this chapter of my life has now come to an end, as a new one is beginning. Last April, my husband and I received the news we are expecting our first child this December. We both came to the decision for me to become a full-time, stay-at-home mom for our son. While I'm very excited to become a mom and have the opportunity to spend each day with my son, it's definitely bittersweet as I have to say goodbye to some amazing coworkers, board members, supporters, and veterans. But I leave you in good hands as Nolan Anderson is HVAF's new Marketing and Communications Manager and your new host for Roger That. I am excited to cheer on from afar and see what stories he creates and shares in the future. All right, Nolan, take it away.
And welcome back to Roger That. My name is Nolan Anderson, and I'm so thrilled to be taking over as your new host. It's an honor to be stepping into this role, and I'm so excited to continue the amazing work that Lauren has done. Jumping right in, today's episode is particularly special, as it features Lauren's final interview as Roger That host with Emmy Hildebrand, our CEO here at HVAF. Emmy will be sharing her firsthand experience and some of the emotions she was feeling during the night of the catastrophic fire at Manchester Apartments. Directly following that, we will be sharing a conversation we had with Crystal, a Navy veteran and one of the residents who was displaced by the fire. Crystal shares her journey of recovery following the tragedy from that night and shares how her loyal dog Fiona has been a beacon of hope during this trying time. But first, let's catch everybody up on the details from the night of the fire. On October 26th, at Manchester Apartments, a fire broke out at around 9:30 p.m. The fire grew quickly, and 97 firefighters fought the blaze for well over 4 hours. At the time of the fire, we had 51 units housing 48 residents, and we are so grateful that every single one of them made it out safely and into temporary accommodations in hotels throughout the city. And as of now, we are so happy to confirm that HVAF has successfully relocated 10 of the displaced veteran residents, with several moving into permanent housing. The others have been placed into open units across HVAF's 13 other properties. For the veterans we serve, the loss from the fire was unimaginable. We deeply appreciate the community's ongoing support as we work to rebuild and recover over the next 2 years. Thank you.
So I was at home on Saturday, October 26th. I was actually in bed, and I got a text from a good friend who lives close to HVAF and it said, "Hey, I think your building's on fire." And she had seen it as an alert on the Citizen app. I don't have that app, but I could see in the thumbnail that 2,000 people were watching a live stream of the fire. So I knew that it was going to be something different than kind of the ordinary kitchen fire or, person smoking or whatever. So I texted Bernie Cruz and Todd Norris, our overlapping vice presidents of support, asked if anyone knew anything about a fire, and they were going to find out and get back to me. So I decided to go ahead and get dressed and come down to the office. And I don't live that far away, about 2 miles. So I come up 65 north through downtown, and I was just about through the downtown portion, and I could see a big plume of smoke over our building. Because that was kind of the first real, tangible confirmation that this was not going to be just a small fire, which, we have dealt with before. When I got off the interstate exit at Pennsylvania Street, the 10th Street and Pennsylvania were already blocked by a couple of fire trucks. So I parked my car in the parking lot, walked to the first, fire crew I saw, and I was like, "Hey, I'm the CEO here. What's going on?" And they directed me to the other side of the building where they had set up kind of a command and control center. So I got over there, and there was our on-call social worker for the evening. It was Lucy Dyer, our healthcare navigator. She was engaging with veterans already. The smoke was pretty heavy. But there was one firefighter that was collecting names and phone numbers of residents of Manchester. And so Lucy and I began directing veterans to him to make sure he got their info. And then we started sending people to the parking lot. The smoke was overwhelming. So we wanted to get people out of that as quickly as possible. So after I checked in with Fire Command and Control, my friend who texted me, Jennifer Wagner Chartier, she came down too. She has worked in public relations a long time. So she had coordinated actually the media that was here, WTHR and I think Wish TV. She had them staged in the parking lot for me to talk to when I was ready. So I did those 2 interviews, and then I spent the rest of the night going back and forth between HVAF staff and the fire control. So the big task of the night was trying to locate all the veterans that lived in the building. We had 48 veterans plus I think 4 spouses that lived in the building on the night of the fire. When I first arrived, we only had accountability for about 25 people. So I was able to access our housing roster on my phone, screenshotted that and sent it to Katie Zachary. And she and Jasmine Smith, another one of our case managers, started calling people, trying to find them. And so it was encouraging that as the night went on, we got more and more accountability. Indigo sent 2 buses that served as initially as warming buses for veterans who were displaced. Lucy had been going to the different paramedic rigs to get blankets for people, but it was cold and there was water everywhere. So the buses were a welcome sight for people to get out of the weather, kind of in the warmth. So our staff started to move veterans to the buses. And then I just kept going back and forth. So when I would go talk to the firefighters in control, we were looking at blueprints of the building, trying to understand where people might be, what units people were living in that were unaccounted for. And then they were continually telling me to get full accountability of our people and to think about securing the site because when they left, obviously there would be a burned out building that had people's possessions and, potentially information that needed to be retained for investigation purposes. So I spent the whole night going back and forth. Lauren Martis is another staff member who responded. She wasn't called, but she came, and she was so valuable that night because she went over to a hotel to make reservations for all 48 people. We had to do it in person, so she handled that. She got them all rooms for the night. She, borrowed credit cards from different staff members who have them to get that done. So the veterans were waiting on the buses. Fire investigators were already here at that time too. So they were talking with veterans. What did you see? When did the alarm go off? When did you smell smoke? Where did you smell the smoke? And that was kind of surprising to me. I didn't realize the investigation would start so soon. So once fire investigators talked to every veteran, they were cleared to leave. I think that was around 3 a.m. There were some veterans who were not adequately clothed, or needed, food items or whatever. So we worked with the fire department to be able to come back in our headquarters building, which is obviously attached to the building that was on fire. So, we made some quick trips through the pantry to get clothing and food to take to the hotel. Another one of our case managers, Brittany, was here. She took my credit card and went to CVS to buy over-the-counter medications that veterans would need for the night, and also phone chargers because many left those in their room. So that when the veterans left, then it was just us and fire crews. They were telling me, I think we had something like 4, maybe up to 6 ladder trucks with hoses spraying down Manchester at the time. But they said that the fire would continue to reignite probably through the night because there was a rubber portion of the roof that they just have a hard time putting out. So at around 3 or so, one of the lead investigators was like, go home, get some rest. We'll be here all night putting out this fire. Come back in the morning and we'll start to dig through what happened here. What happened on the street during the fire was pretty interesting. The pawn shop across the street brought out bottled water for everybody. I went into living room lounge to use the restroom, and it was filled with smoke because they're just south of where we are. And the bartender was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're closed." So I told her I was from HVAF, and she was like, "Oh yeah, go ahead, go." And when I left, she said, "I'm sorry, I thought you were just coming in for looking for a drink." And I was like, "Well, I might also be that. Like, it's been a long night." But they were, great neighbors. They let firefighters in there to use the restroom. They let staff use the restroom. It was nice. It was also close to Halloween, so when the bars closed, lots of people were on the sidewalk wearing costumes, which is pretty surreal. This huge fire going on, and Cleopatra walks by, so it just made the night even more interesting. It was close to 4, and I wanted to send a quick note to staff. Obviously, a lot of people knew, but a lot of people didn't know, so I wanted to make sure that they were aware of this information. I sent that email and got some immediate responses, which is kind of funny since it was the middle of the night. I woke up at 6 the next morning, getting texts from people, and I'll back up and say during the fire, lots of our community partners were texting me like, "Hey, I'm watching the news. I just saw you. How can I help?" So that has been kind of the theme of the last 10 or so days is, people volunteering to do whatever they can to help. The fire investigators came back at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. So I had the senior team meet here just to be a part of that. So I knew they were going to have lots of questions. Obviously, I've never been through this before, so I was kind of surprised how many people it was. And since we received so much federal funding, one of them was an officer from ATF. So there were federal law enforcement here as well. And Sunday morning, we still could not find 2 veterans. So that was really a significant effort right away, is to find these 2 veterans. Neither one of them had cell phones. So we also couldn't access the case manager office in Manchester that had their next of kin information. So we did work with our VA liaison, and she was able to get next of kin info. So we called them, and through the next of kin, we found one of the veterans. So then we were just down to 1. The really sobering part about the investigators, they were telling me, if you can't find this person, we have to bring in a cadaver dog to look. And they had told me during the fire, I think they made a total of 3 sweeps going to every room, that they didn't find anybody inside. So for the most part, I was fairly confident that there wasn't anybody in there, but you kind of can't hear those words cadaver dog and not just be sick about what they might find. So they brought in 2 dogs pretty early in the investigation, 1 cadaver dog and 1 accelerant detector dog, because they have to explore all options about the cause of the fire and how it spread. So thankfully, by midday Sunday, the cadaver dog completed its walkthrough and didn't find any human remains, but we still couldn't find the 1 veteran. The accelerant dog walked through, but we didn't hear a report on that at all. So the case manager for the one last veteran, her name is Jenny, and she went through her case notes and found that veteran liked to go to Steak and Shake. So she went to Steak and Shake and found him there. And so around 3:00, we were having an emergency board meeting when we got the news that he had been located and was fine. And I think all of HVAF let out a sigh of relief that finally all 48 veterans were found. When you watch the news footage and see how high the flames were, it's just a miracle that, no one died. And, 3 veterans went to the hospital with smoke inhalation, but they were all released. So, just really, really lucky. So we had fire investigators here for 2 or 3 days, I think, and ultimately they determined that the cause of the fire was an accidental fire, likely electrical, started in the attic. So once they made that determination, our insurance company investigator was here as well and concurred. I had my first opportunity to walk through the building, and there have been a lot of moments of kindness along this way, but I just wanted to see for myself. So the ATF agent actually loaned me her boots so that I wouldn't get hurt. And I walked with her and one of the Indianapolis Fire Department investigators. The southern part of the building is horrible. That's where the fire started, in the attic above the second floor. And there's very little that remains. The entire roof burned off in that section, and there's just burned stuff everywhere. Between everything that's burned, the missing roof, all of the water, there's very little to be salvaged there. The northern part of the building has significant water damage. They were spraying it down pretty good to keep it from igniting. And there's, everything is wet. And within the last few days, mold has started to grow, and there's kind of a funk smell now. So there's not much there to be salvaged either that doesn't have toxic smoke residue on it or isn't wet and mildewing.
So then what is next for the building after assessing the damage?
So we've had our insurance company here for the last, just about week. And they have a restoration company that's focused on understanding what goes into demolishing the building. So it sounds like the brick exterior walls are good, but a large portion of everything inside those walls is going to have to go. The southern part of the building is going to be completely gutted. The northern part of the building, the first floor, probably be completely gutted. A majority of the second floor, and then the third floor was above the fire, actually, and it's probably in the best shape, but still having to understand how wet it got and address the water challenges there. So we are waiting on a report from an engineer about the structural stability and what needs to be braced up and shored up before demo can start. We also need to understand it's an old building, so maybe that's another silver lining of all of this is we opened Manchester Apartments in 2011, and I think it fit the needs of 2011. But now it's 2024, and we need to think about the building we need now and the building we need in the future. So it's not a complete blank canvas, but we have a lot of opportunity to rethink how the building is laid out and how it can better serve the veterans that we serve.
So how are the veterans doing? I know some are at a hotel, some have been moved into housing. How's all that?
Yeah, so I would say, we always have to remember that these veterans have just been through a significant trauma. They were here in a program trying to, find their way back to self-sufficiency and, their own permanent housing. So going through this traumatic fire has made a huge impact on those veterans. We have a great team. We've got some mental health professionals that have been on site at hotels. And we're trying to wrap around as many services as we can. Our community has been a big part of that. So the items through our Amazon wish list and other donations, we've been able to help replace clothing and provide food. And the hotels that they're in they have kitchenettes. So, I know a veterans organization donated pots and pans and dishes. We put out a plea for coffee makers since there aren't those in the rooms, just to try to make this time a little bit easier for veterans. As you mentioned, we're very excited that 2 veterans moved out into permanent housing this week, which is the ultimate goal for all of the veterans. And that's where we'll spend our effort over these next several weeks, is trying to move as many veterans into permanent housing as are ready. And then as space opens up in our other transitional beds, to move veterans who aren't ready to move into permanent housing there. So as I said, during the fire, I was getting calls and text messages from community partners offering to help. And that has been, ongoing. I know everybody that works here is getting an outpouring of, like, hey, I saw your building on the news. How can I help? So I think the Amazon truck just parks here every day, which is great. We're getting around 200 packages a day to help meet the immediate basic needs of these veterans. On a good day, we need our community to be successful serving veterans. We need them now more than ever, and they have delivered. I would say we've had several media partners walking this journey with us. And it's been really interesting to see the number of people that just genuinely care about, the veterans that we're serving and wanting to make sure that they're taken care of. And our news highlighting that has been helpful. I know people have questions. We live in a city and a state that values veterans and the service and sacrifice they make on our behalf. So we're really thankful that we're able to, share their story, what happened, what will happen. And we've heard from some of the veterans as well about their experience the night of the fire and how it's been going since. So I'm appreciative that we're able to share those. The very best of who we are has been on display these last 10 or so days. We had obviously the large number of people on site during the fire, which was really incredible. I know most people just saw it on TV and wanted to help. And I think that says a lot about who we are. We're all here to serve veterans. We're all here to make a difference. And it started, that night for this particular emergency. The next day, we had to relocate all of the veterans to different hotels. It was a Sunday, but the full transitional housing team was here on site, moving veterans around. I think we finally went home around 9:30 or 10, and we've been working that way every day since. All hands on deck, whatever it takes, whatever you need from me, and it's really neat to be a part of a team that will do whatever it takes to accomplish the mission.
Those listening right now, like what can they do that would be most helpful?
We've been directing people to visit our website, hvaf.org. We've set up a special fire assistance fund to help with recovery and rebuilding of Manchester. So address some of those immediate basic needs of veterans. As I mentioned, we're trying to move them into permanent housing. So that takes things like application fees, security deposits, rental and utility assistance, moving costs, beds, furniture, just to be able to spend that first night in their new apartments. But we also have to think about the future. We're thankfully, we are covered by insurance on a lot of the building, but there will be things that insurance won't cover that we might need. This past year, we've been talking a lot about the growth in our food pantry and the need. And so maybe there's opportunity to reconfigure that over in Manchester Apartments. So, support like that will help make sure that when we reopen Manchester Apartments, it serves veterans now and is ready to serve veterans for the future. I would just always encourage people to remember kind of the humanity of those involved. I saw some of the news clips too of people saying like, I've already been homeless once. I don't want to do this again. And just understanding the heartbreak of losing what very little stuff you had in a situation like this. So, as much as our community can do to rally around the veterans that we serve and our team, that was a really traumatic event for all of us too. We appreciate that outreach and that support. Our board of directors has been great. I think we've had food here every day since the fire, whether that's donuts or lunch. And I know those feel like small things, but it just is a reminder that we're not alone, that we have a lot of people on our side and pulling with us.
And you just heard from Miss Emmy Hildebrand, our HVAF CEO, as she discussed the night of the fire from her perspective. Now we take you to our conversation with Crystal, one of the veterans who was displaced in the fire. Enjoy.
My name is Crystal Webb. I'm a Navy veteran. I went in September of 2004. I did 16 to 18 months in Iraq, Camp Buka. I served in, I was stationed in Virginia, California. When I got out in February of 2009, I was stationed in California.
So you've been all over.
Yeah, I've been Brazil, Chile, Antigua, St. Martin, Qatar. I was pretty much homeless for about 4 or 5 months. I was staying at my fiance's sister's house. We were staying there. We were sleeping in his car. We've slept in my car. I've had hotel rooms.
What time of year was this?
December.
Okay, so it wasn't the easy months either.
Not at all. But of course, I knew about the pantry. But I had already gotten on the crisis. I had already called the crisis line again. I do that very well. When I go through my mental phases, I call the crisis line because at the time I didn't have my my meds.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get back on all of that, do everything. Everything was good. So turn around and at the time they didn't have a place big enough because at Manchester the kids couldn't be there.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a place big enough for the kids, me and the kids. So the way I had to do it was, as long as I had to basically find somewhere if I could find placement for my kids, then I could get in there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they were staying with their grandmother at first. Now they're staying with their father.
Okay.
They want to stay with their father, so they're not that far from me now. They stay with their father until I get my voucher. Then once I get they're on my voucher. So once I get my voucher, then we'll be moving.
That'll be
all
awesome.
Together.
So you were staying in Manchester when the fire happened,
yes.
Right? So can you take me back to the night? What was that like for you? Were you awake when, it started to happen? Or?
So actually, I wasn't even there when it started to happen. Me and my husband decided to go to... We had already made plans the day before to go to the movies to see the new Venom.
Oh, yeah.
In 3D.
Yeah.
So we go to the movies. We're on our way back. Excuse me, as we're on our way back, one of the other neighbors called me, was like, where y'all at? I think the apartments are on fire, and I'm hearing the alarm go off in the background. I was like, we're not there. We're on our way. She was like, where's Fiona? Where's the dog? She's in the cage. She's in the apartment. She was like, do I need to go get her? I said, yes. Can you please go and get her? So she went in there and she got her. It just so happened that my husband did not lock the door, and I thank God that he didn't. He didn't have his key on him to lock the door. Yeah, so she called. When she got in there, I heard Fiona in the background barking like crazy. And she called and she was like, where's her leash? I said, it's right beside the cage. As soon as she opened the door, her leash is right there and the cage is right there. She's fine. She went and got it. She said, okay, I got her. She opened up the cage because Fiona knew exactly who she was. So she opened the cage. She put the leash on her. She got her. She went outside with her. We was in the Uber on the way back, and the Uber driver was stopping them like, you can't go that way. You're going to have to turn around. And like, we was on like 10th and like Alabama, like right there by the little fire station there where you can take West Street. We was right there at that light, and you could see the smoke from the building all the way over there. And as we got closer, he was like, I'm not going to be able to go that way. I said, no, I need you to go that way. That's our apartments. We have to get there. And it was fire trucks steady coming. We got moved all the way around the building. We were standing on the side. Our smoke steady coming. They're getting our names. We didn't have anything. All we had was the sweaters we had on, which I had on a sweater. My husband had on a hoodie. And the one thing I could think about was calling my neighbor. Where you at? So I can get my dog. Where you at? Where you at? Because I know she going crazy. And then I'm trying to call her. She trying to call me at the same time. So finally, my husband's like, where you going? I was like, I'm trying to get my daughter. I'm trying to find my daughter. I know she's out here. So I just need to know where they're at so I can get my daughter.
Yeah.
So I can get back in my state.
You need to put your eyes on Fiona.
So we both can be back. And she was going crazy because everybody knows her. Everybody knows who Fiona is. Everybody knows she's our dog. She's a dog baby. I saw her. I got her. And even though I'm looking at everything go up in flames, I can relax because I got her. So many of us lost everything. Our marriage certificate was in there and everything. We had everything was in there. We had phones. We had laptops. Like, we had just had clothes and food and everybody. Like, we were all just sitting there just upset. Upset and scared, but we steady checking on everybody, making sure everybody was okay. And we was worried about some of our veterans that are older veterans that I think 3 of them had to go to the hospital that night. It's been rough.
This is your opportunity to
Mhm.
speak directly to the donors and the community of HVAF. Is there anything you want them to know?
I would probably say thank you for all the love and the support from everybody, and that we really appreciate it.
All right. And that concludes another episode of the Roger That podcast. My name is Nolan Anderson, and I am your new host, taking over for Lauren, who we wish the best in her future endeavors. I would like to thank Emmy Hildebrand, HVAF CEO, and Crystal for sharing their stories today. If you would like to learn more about some of our veteran stories and keep up to date on all of our news, visit hvaf.org. And until no hero is homeless, we will see you next time on the Roger That podcast. I'm Nolan Anderson. Thanks for listening.